So as Tanim mentioned earlier, what happened was that on the, 6th of October, so first of all, 6th of October, I bought my super duper forever and ever house. Yeah, at last, I'd saved enough. I'd been through enough pain. So I got this really expensive house, my husband and I said, this is it, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Yeah. At the end of that day, of the day we moved in, which was the 6th of October 2017, I remember sitting and thinking, you know, I'm even more grateful that I've seen where my son Ali will grow up. So my son Ali is the reason that I moved from medicine to law. My son Ali, alhamdulillah, is 22 years old. He has the mental age of a 7-year-old. Okay? And so I knew that Ali, bi'ithnillah, will always be living with us. It's not that, you know, where will he move to, etc., etc. It will be that, alhamdulillah, I've seen the place that, inshallah, he will be looked after even when I'm not there. Okay? Then on the 10th of October, so 4 days later, I was traveling to Switzerland because I was going to be lecturing UN people about women and safety internationally and mediation. And this is where I want to just pause for a moment to remind you that it's ever so dangerous for us to fall into the trappings. Many of you are leaders within your families, within your workplaces, businesses, etc. There's a risk to us that when you're engulfed with adoration, when people are so, you know, they have you on a pedestal, and, you know, you're like, alhamdulillah, a'udhu billah, you know, my taqwa, etc., etc. You can get to a point where you're really proud of being humble. Huh? Look at me, I'm so humble, I'm willing to speak to anybody. Yeah, even Tanim's email. You know? So that's just a cautionary note as well, that, you know, mashallah, tabarakallah, bi'idhnillah, you will all have great tawfiq, bi'idhnillah ta'ala, yeah? But just remember that when people around you, you know, your parents, wider family, you know, they're all, you know, lifting you up, really proud of you, etc., just remind yourselves to still be humble, not just on the prayer mat. Yeah? So coming now to the 10th of October, you know, lecturing, international platform, etc., etc., that extraordinarily I had time to myself. Because I was staying in a hotel abroad, I didn't have the children, my husband, and so I was getting ready, and I realized that I couldn't see from one eye. So I thought, okay, that's probably just a dud contact lens. I'll sort it out when I get back home. And fast forwarding, it wasn't the contact lens. I drove home ever so carefully from City Airport because I couldn't see out of one eye. And I decided that, okay, it's Friday night, Monday morning, I will go to hospital. Yeah, I know the hospital, know people there. I'll just go, just get myself checked out. Yeah? It's probably something and nothing, but let's just check it out. So the gentleman who tested my eyes said, Dr. ElShiekh, I'm really sorry to tell you that your eyes are completely normal. So I knew in that instant that we're talking about something much bigger. And in fact, fast forwarding, it was a tumor, so a brain tumor, and a very large one. So I'll never look at an egg the same way again, because they said it was the size of an egg, and it was. Yeah? And my husband, bless him, said, you see, I've always known that your head is just full of air. Yeah, that's why you didn't get any headaches or anything like that. It's just an empty space with this egg rolling around. Yeah, there's the proof of it. And so what was then the biggest challenge was containing my excitement, because I was so excited to be returning to Rabbana subhanahu wa ta'ala. I was delighted. It was as if it was my wedding. You know, I had contacted my sisters, got them ready on the ghusl list. You know, I contacted Gardens of Peace, Brother Muhammad Umar, and said, look, Brother Muhammad, you know, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala, I'll be coming to you, yeah, on the 31st of October. That was the date of my operation. I was so excited. I mean, I can't describe to you how excited I was because, you know, all this, and that's why I went to the length of telling you about my house. It's not just to, you know, show off it. It's not to show off. It's just to tell you the context that I have everything to live for. Nahmidallahu nashkuru, yeah? Career, you know, family, home, everything. Nahmidallahu nashkuru. But presented with the opportunity of going to Rabbana subhanahu wa ta'ala, well, you know, I was not going to be walking or strolling towards that. I wanted to run towards, you know. And so then what ensued was, as I say, the challenge was to contain the excitement because, of course, my husband, my children were broken, you know, really bereft, you know, and there's me saying, oh, I can't believe how lucky I am, you know, that Rabbana subhanahu wa ta'ala has called me, has chosen me, yeah? And so then I went to hospital, to King's College. I was there for 57 days. I endured 6 operations, 2 bouts of meningitis, nahmadallahu nashkuru. And at the end of the first operation, I have to tell you, brothers and sisters, that I cried. When I woke up, I cried. I was so disappointed. Really, you know, I can still feel it now, you know, the gulp in my throat. I was so disappointed not to be going to Rabbana subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so when they said to me that this operation hasn't succeeded, you know, another operation, I was like, oh, great, maybe it's this one then, you know, I'll be able to go this time. And so on and so on and so on, yeah. And so I accepted, as I had to accept that, okay, it wasn't my time to meet Rabbana subhanahu wa ta'ala at that point, that the ibtila, the beautiful ibtila, was the closest I would get at that time. And I'll just describe the ibtila just in a couple of seconds, which is that, you know, occasionally when we get that connection with Rabbana subhanahu wa ta'ala and you feel carried, you feel a warmth, you know, the summer's day, it's not hot, it's not cold, but you just feel a comfortable glow. I had that constantly in the ibtila. And so that's why I wanted to go and have all of it, being greedy as one is. You know, I wanted to have this all the time. I didn't want to come back to dunya and just get it occasionally. The proof of this connection was not just in the heart, it was that I knew for certain that the procedures that I was going through. So for instance, one of the operations, you know, I was bleeding out, you know, in the bed. So I wasn't even in theatre, I was bleeding out. There were 4 men, mashallah, working on me, trying to find access, you know. And I knew, definitely knew, that this is a very painful process. You know, I've got people cutting down, trying to find veins, you know, I'm collapsed, etc., etc. So I knew that this is a very painful process, but I could not feel it. I could just about feel somebody touching me, but that's about it. Yeah? And so, you know, a funny aspect of all of this is that, you know, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen, I don't take it for granted that when, you know, I was in this bleeding out process, so I was conscious but bleeding out, that I was saying la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah. And my husband, you know, it would appear that I'd, you know, pass out. Then my husband would be slapping my face and say, you know, Zaza, speak to me, speak to me. And I'd say, like, you know, of all the times, you know, all our marriage, you tell me I talk too much. Now when I want to rest and I just want to ease off to Rabbana subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're slapping me to talk, you know. So you know, the message that I want to give you is waste no minute. I always thought that I'm striving bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, and it is only bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. You can strive, but if Allah doesn't want it, it won't be. Yeah? So when I was a doctor, I was really disappointed that I needed to change. I've told you about Ali, that was the trigger. You know, he's been the best blessing. You know, as a mother, I mean, I don't know if anybody's got children in the room yet. Yes, a few of you do. So of your children, probably they're very young at the moment, yeah? And so you probably sometimes think to yourself, gosh, you know, if the worst was to happen, my child will go to Jannah because they're little, yeah? For me, nahmidallahu nushkuru, I have 3 children. Ali is the only one that I can be certain will go to Jannah. That's such a comfort to me. Such a comfort. So that in itself, let alone anything else, you know, there's beautiful stories about Ali as well. But that in itself, that certainty that he will go to Jannah is enough for me. You know, it lifts me up. So I wondered if it would be better for me to stop now, and if there's time for you to ask any questions. This is again me being self-important that you've got any questions. But if you have any questions, then please do ask anything you like. Yes.
You told us the trigger to leaving medicine into to law is Ali.
Yes.
Why is that, if you don't mind asking?
No, not at all. So this comes now to the ambition. So I always strove, way back in my ignorant days, it wasn't just for Allah. I strove to be the best in everything for myself, and then to say Alhamdulillah. So when I was going for medicine, and a lot of people said to me, no, not in hijab, they're not going to take you in hijab, you know, this sort of thing. So I strove to do that, you know. I'm embarrassed to say I took off the hijab for the interview and then put it back on again, yeah? But again, my father said to me, look, you know, you need to do certain things, just do it, get through it, and go. So the reason that I changed from medicine to law is that I wanted to be the best in obstetrics and gynecology, yeah? And, you know, very competitive field, mostly white at that time. So we're talking about the late 90s at that time. And I wanted to be the best, and because of Ali, I was often in the hospital, not at work, but with Ali for one of his appointments, you know, various appointments. He couldn't see, he couldn't walk, he couldn't talk. And now, nahmidallahu nushkuru, again, he's the only one of my 3 children who reads Quran, who is bilingual, Arabic, English. You know, so there's lots of miracles about Ali, nahmidallahu nushkuru. But at that time, it was just too much to maintain, or at least strive to be the best with all the commitment that I had. I'll just tell you quickly about law, why I left law, because I think it may be relevant to this situation. Your focus is that in law, win-lose. Yeah? You can't both be winners. As a litigator, I was a defender of doctors, nurses, midwives, etc. with my medical background. Again, you know, I was really proud of myself that, you know, I know more medicine than the lawyers and know more law than the medics. You know, may Allah forgive me, but that's how I felt. Yeah. You know, that was the ambition, you know. I found myself in a situation where, you know, I was defending people who I knew had done wrong. Yeah, so I wasn't a criminal lawyer, but even defending negligence when I knew that there's a family who are torn apart. because their child or the father or the mother, due to negligence, has suffered. Yeah, but my job was to get them off completely, as in not be struck off, or so just allowing them to practice, or to reduce the time that they weren't allowed to practice. And that was deeply uncomfortable. So I decided to become a mediator, and that's what Tanim was talking about in terms of, traveling the world and lecturing and so on. Any others? Tanim?
I'm actually quite curious to hear in what ways, if any, has your life changed, or your perspective, or even your relationship with Allah changed since your recent experience?
So what I would say is that, rather selfishly, it's difficult not to be disappointed. The difficult struggle is to accept that Allah didn't want me to return to Him at that time. Because, as I say, I've had the taste of being held, of being in that euphoric situation where, you feel the connection so closely. And yes, you'll glimpse it, as I say, if you're really lucky, particularly in Ramadan, you might glimpse it 3 out of 5 of your fard prayers, and again in your nawafil, your tarawih, you might glimpse it there, Maybe some of you have it all the time, but my experience was that I would just glimpse it, and it would be beautiful, but then dunya would come in the way, that currently I lead a firm that has mostly men in it. They're all non-Muslim. And so, again, there are the issues around, for instance, being the only female, being the only Muslim, being the only black person there, where things are said sometimes, like, for instance, recently, so this is work with the Home Office, and recently somebody from the Home Office said that, guys, we're going to have to, so it's guys, but you accept that, you're like, no. So, okay, guys, we're going to have to be whiter than white. And you're like, okay, you've just set me an impossible task. Yeah? So, again, a message to you, and I'm hoping that, your experience hasn't been marred by discrimination, prejudice, so that you are able to greet prejudice. So, for instance, when somebody says that, rather than being, confrontational about it and saying how inappropriate it is, that I'll, make a joke out of it, but let them know that, I've called it, that I've noticed it. So, anything else? Yes. Do you want to go first, or you?
So, I couldn't think of a single person who would be excited about having a tumor. How would you say you've built your iman or connection with Allah to that stage?
So I knew that we knew that Rabbana subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that He will test us. Yes, He will test us with our property, what you were talking about today. He'll test us with our children, for those of you who have children, And yet when it happens, it's like, why has this happened to me? You have to struggle to say Alhamdulillah. Yeah. So I think that it is from Allah that the iman has been built up to this level. It's not me, because I'm really good at doing things. I could easily say, oh yeah, I try to be the best, and so that's how hopefully I've got a satisfactory level of iman. But it is min fadlallah, from Rabbana subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's one thing. So it's about praying for it. So even before all of this scenario, I was only 47, the tumor, and I know 47 may sound really old to you, but I was only 47 at that point, and I used to make a daily dua that I would die Muslim, because I've seen so much death, and particularly in the scenario where somebody's having a baby, and they're not thinking about death then, but death comes to them. Yeah, you ordinarily as a woman, I know there's only one woman here other than myself, that you would be, perhaps feeling some trepidation about childbirth, but you're not imagining that you're going to die, So again, for Muslim women, to really clock that, Rabbana subhanahu wa ta'ala, has gone to, in his infinite wisdom, has gone through so much detail about childbirth. So Sayyidah Maryam radiallahu anha. The trauma of it, the pain of it, and then we know about the blessings of it, that you get sort of double, triple bonus points just for being in labor, yeah? So in terms of Iman, it's something that you have to pray for, so ask for it. Dua is about all sorts of things. Sometimes people forget to ask for Iman because they consider they've already got Iman. So another message from me would be to please ask Rabbana subhanahu wa ta'ala for Iman, as I do still daily. Yeah? And that I also ask Rabbana subhanahu wa ta'ala to give me a death where I had time to prepare, as in to prepare my stuff, my loved ones, etc. And I think that's probably the reason that I'm so fearful, not of death, but of having not had it then when I had prepared, as I say, it was like a walima for me, yeah. And, just sort of going in a car crash or something like that where you've not put all those things in place. So one of the other things that I would also say is that all of you, no matter what your age is, should have a will, yeah. You're interested in finance, you know that if you die at any moment in time without a will, that 40% of your estate that you've worked jolly hard for will go to the crown. Yeah? As a certainty, because you will die intestate. Yeah? So, I would ask that the organizers, in talking about making wealth, also to protect wealth in the event of death. And for you not to think, hey, I'm only 20, I'm only 25, I'm only 30, I'm only 35, that's not going to happen. I'm well, I'm fit. As Muslims, we have to remember that نحمد الله ونشكره. When he calls, we go. Yeah? We're all in a waiting room, like at your GPs, where you don't know, you come in, you try to be on time, you come in, you see there are a number of people there, somebody who, came in after you goes before you, is called before you, somebody who was sat there when you came in and you've gone in and come out and they're still there. It's the same thing, that you just don't know when, who, how you'll go, how you'll be called. So be prepared. Think more of death than life would be my key message. Prepare for the departure. Help your family and family members to also think of the departure at any point whatsoever. Not in a doom and gloom sense, but I won't say, in an excitement, because you'll probably get straitjacketed for that. But to be prepared for it, to have your affairs in place, organized. There's nothing wrong with that. And Rabbana subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that in the event of us being struck by an illness, to prepare our wills. Yes, we've got 2 days to allowed to then prepare the will. So why not have it prepared anyway? And if Rabbana subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you that mercy of having time to prepare, then you can just update the will, rather than scrambling around looking for somebody to write your will in a halal way. Because one of the challenges legally is that you write an Islamic will and it's not enforceable because it doesn't have the certainty. It's not written in a way that is certain. And for anything to be valid under English law, it has to have a certain time and subject, what is it that you're wanting to give. And that's something that I do for friends and family, probably most weeks of the year, because somebody's called me to say, I need a will. It's not because they're well and they just want to do it. They're calling because they're ill, And so that would be another message. I must be out of time now. I'm happy to take questions, but I don't want to take up people's time.
Maybe one more question? One last question?
Honestly, like, Jazakallah khair for like sharing your like life with us in your story. We talked a lot about mindset today, and at the beginning you talked about ihsan. So I was just wondering, like, what are the practical things that helps you like have that presence throughout your life, and also like the mindset and approach that you just have towards life in general? Like, what are the practical things that helps you?
Okay, so practicalities would be having the Quran close to me. So one of my thoughts when I couldn't see was la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. I always wanted to perfect my hifz, that I haven't had the opportunity to do that. I know some, but definitely not all. And it was always because what if Rabbana subhanahu wa ta'ala takes my sight? There's nothing like listening is beautiful, but there's nothing like actually reciting yourself, because you can give it your own meaning, your own inflections and repetition and so on, rather than stop, pause, rewind, play. You can do all of that in yourself. So having the Quran close to me, making the time to reflect on the ayahs, because the ayahs are there as signs from Rabbana subhanahu wa ta'ala, as evidence, as proof of his existence. But many of us, including myself, you may look at the ayah, read the ayah, perfect your tajweed of the ayah, you may look at tafsir of the ayah, but you may not have made sufficient time to look and explore the meaning of that ayah to you, the context for you. You've read this tafsir, that tafsir, you may have even, gone to reading 10 tafsirs about it. But what I would say is the most powerful is to reflect on the context for you. Thinking about Rabbana subhanahu wa ta'ala being closer to us than our jugular. When you're bleeding out, you think of that. You think, there's absolutely no problem because Allah is so close to me. I'm bleeding, bleeding out. But actually, this is really cool, because He's right here. So thinking of the jugular at that point, do you see what I mean? When somebody's trying to get, blood into you through your jugular vein, and thinking of Rabbana subhanahu wa ta'ala in the context of that ayah. So what I would say is, I've talked about a couple of things, like how Rabbana subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that He will test us with our children, with our property. So when you are tested with your property, to really think about that context, because actually, when you lose, more than £1 million, if that ever happens to anybody here, I won't say when, rather than thinking, la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, why has this happened to me? I approached this person in good faith, they're Muslim, why have they done this? What's happening to the ummah, etc. You're actually, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. This is another opportunity for me to see the sign, the evidence, because the ayah is there, that I will be tested. And alhamdulillah that I've lived to see that test. Do you see? So really thinking about the signs, the evidence, the ayah that's there that you've read about, and reflecting at any point, whether you lost 5p or you lost £50 or £500, whatever it is, the test of that, the anxiety about money, to actually receive it with joy. Because Rabbana subhanahu wa ta'ala only tests, only gives ibtila to those who He loves. And, to be counted as, at least at that time, because God help me what's happened between then and now, but at least at that time, to be one of the chosen special people to be tested is amazing. All right. Okay. Thank you for having me, and I hope I haven't bored you too much.
I think everybody's still a bit shocked. SubhanAllah, that was phenomenal. I I did tell you guys that it was serious stuff, right?
Serious.